Hello, bienvenue. I hope you guys are having a good year so far. Life is a bit chaotic and somewhat terrifying with everything happening in the world right now. So let's talk about something a little more wholesome. Schitt's Creek. I actually tried when it first aired, but I couldn't get past the cringy, awkward humor. For me, that's just so painful. But recently I actually sat down and watched it from beginning to end because so many people urged me to. And I'm so glad I did because I loved it. How could I not? With witty, poignant humor and deranged charm that was far more wholesome than I ever could have begun to imagine. That's not to say that I didn't spend a huge portion of the episodes with my fingers stuffed in my ear and chanting a mantra of, oh God, no. Because I did. A lot. Waiting to watch the show definitely had its benefits. Like the ability to binge watch it from beginning to end, which I kind of did. But it also gave me the opportunity to witness its continual growth and evolution up until the finale. And I think the show definitely ended at the right time. It didn't try to push beyond what it needed to be, like so many other shows. And its finale actually felt earned with its earnestness and openness and honesty. For you, it just felt right. It felt like the characters got what they deserved. And you felt as an audience that you actually got what you deserved. Who would have thought that this little show of humble Canadian origins would take the world by storm like it did thanks to Netflix? But to be honest, we actually have a lot of little nuggets of goodness that the world seems completely ignorant of. Like Lost Girl, or Kim's Convenience, Corner Gas, Trailer Park Boys. And did you know that Total Drama Island? Yeah, that's Canadian too. I loved this show for so many reasons, and the fact that it was Canadian was only a minuscule part of that. It's definitely the classic trope of a fall from grace. We're talking rich versus poor, or big city meets small town, but it's done in such a unique way that it doesn't feel like that same old tired story of culture clash. It's got such loopy logic and nuance to it. It's the portrait of spoiled assholes that evolve into likable people. This is not all that common in sitcoms because in a sitcom there's usually very little character growth. The characters are a bit zany, but they find meaning in hard-earned satisfaction. They started out as the worst version of themselves, completely self-absorbed and without an ounce of self-awareness. But they managed to come together as a family with newfound empathy. We watched them become human. The characters came down to earth. They learned the reality of the world, but still managed to maintain this air of absurdity about them. But they also never relied on those cliché tropes of relationship drama to drive the plot forward. And I definitely appreciate that. Instead, it remained a character-driven situational comedy, but one that had a bit of weight behind it. Because of the bubble of isolation of being a Canadian television show, we got a very different story than what you usually see in TV. The culture up here in Canada is very different than what you see down in the States. And I bet that the American networks that turned down the show are kicking themselves now. But that lack of Hollywood meddling is exactly what allowed for the natural growth and inclusion of a depiction of a far more inclusive world. Because Schitt's Creek became a beacon for the LGBT community. Because of its casual, progressive inclusion of a world without homophobia. Finding the healthy representation of LGBT in media is so hard because queer characters are so often the side character, or the punchline to a joke, or the tragedy, or even a plot point. For some reason, sexuality needs to serve the purpose of the plot, which is not what it should be in any way, because it's just a reality of life. Schitt's Creek created a world where sexuality isn't a tragedy or a farce. Even better, Patrick and David are the couple that you root for, and you are so thrilled when they get their happy ending. There is no anxiety in sexuality or exclusion or prejudice, but what we get is acceptance in harmony and the lack of sexual stigma. David and Patrick's relationship normalizes same-sex relationships in a way that the world needs to see. It helps create a more loving, kinder, and open world for us to live in. And it does it in such a way that it is absolutely humorous, but still respectful. Schitt's Creek is an open invitation for TV to do better. Did it suffer for its representation and normalization of LGBT? No. But networks are so terrified to alienate their hetero audiences that they'll be called out on pushing a queer agenda if they even give us a tiny bit of representation. But what they should be more afraid of is the fact they are pushing a reality where equality does not exist. That the LGBT community does not exist, or they are worth less than their hetero counterparts. The LGBT community lives in a constant state of fear and rejection. And that's because media continues to perpetuate this narrative of difference and conflict with tragedy and negativity. What we need is to lead by example, and that means positive representation that normalizes diversity. So, have you watched Schitt's Creek? If you haven't, then you definitely should. It might be painful at times, but it's worth your time. So until next time, cheers.